All right, so today I want us to finally get to the speech of Socrates that is sort of the high point of the symposium. So we've been looking at the various speeches about love from the other participants in the party, and each speech, if you think about it, has become like slightly more sophisticated and slightly more elevated than the previous one. This will sort of come to a head with Socrates, but you can see how each person sort of adds a level of analysis to the question of love. Now, it's difficult for Socrates to give a speech, because if you've read Plato before, or if you know anything about Socrates' reputation, he generally prefers to ask questions, because to give a speech would be to put oneself in a position of someone who knows, and Socrates famously claims that, the only thing I know is that I know nothing. So it's going to be difficult for Socrates to give a traditional speech about the meaning of love, and his solution to this problem is basically to tell the story of a conversation that he had with a woman named Diotima. Socrates' appeal to Diotima is interesting for a couple of reasons. One reason is you might have noticed that most of the speeches given earlier in the dialogue were fairly sexist. With the exception of Aristophanes, but especially the early speeches, the general assumption was that, love in the proper sense can only exist between two men, and that, love between a man and a woman is not really on their radar. So Socrates sort of flips the script on that by having Diotima basically teach Socrates about love. Right? So if you compare this with the first two speeches, it's a fairly radical transformation. And you might say that the path for this was cleared by Aristophanes' speech. So what does Socrates know about love? Well, what he knows about love, he, again, learned from Diotima. And ultimately, what Socrates learns about love is that love is a ladder. Love is a staircase, so to speak, that ought to take us higher and higher beyond the love for a physical being into love for beauty itself. So one of the key points in Socrates' speech is the beginning. Right? He is going to emphasize the fact that love, eros, is a desire for something. And the question is, well, what is it that eros desires? And eros, being eros, it's natural to say that it desires beauty, or at least it desires beautiful things, right? So, and this is apparent in some of the earlier speeches about eros, when they're always talking about eros in relationship to, a beautiful person. And so what this means, though, according to Socrates, is that love itself is not beautiful. Love itself is a desire for beauty. Right? This is why love can sometimes be painful or hurtful. Right? Socrates has a non-sentimental view of love. Right? It doesn't always make one happy. It's a desire for a beautiful thing, but it is not itself beautiful. In fact, love itself, he says, is sort of ugly and poor, desiring things that are, good and beautiful. This is an important point. It's not a particular beautiful thing. Ultimately, what love desires, according to Socrates, is beauty itself. And what he's going to describe in his speech is this move from the initial desire for a beautiful thing, maybe a beautiful person, to more and more refined versions of desire for beauty until you finally come to a desire for beauty itself. Ultimately, Socrates is going to say, and this is at 206a, that everyone who loves nothing other than the good. You might say, well, how did you get from the desire for the beautiful to the desire for the good? Ultimately, for Plato, the good and the beautiful are the same. There are two different ways of talking about the same thing, right? That beauty, as Plato understands it, is that which attracts, right? Something is beautiful insofar as it is able to attract, let's say, desires. Well, we also would say that we don't desire anything that we don't believe to be good, right? No one says, oh, well, that's not good, but I desire it, right? Socrates would say that people desire what they believe to be good. Now, they might be wrong about what's good, but to desire something is basically to implicitly believe that it is good, to believe that it's desirable. Well, so we begin to see that goodness, or the good and the beautiful, function in the same way as sort of objects of desire. And ultimately, Socrates or Plato is going to say they are the same thing. The good is the beautiful, and the beautiful is the good. To say that what this means is not that whatever is, momentarily beautiful is good, but really what it means is that there's a moral context to beauty. And Socrates does not think that something can be beautiful without also being good, right? So it's not that anything that people think looks cool is therefore good, but it's really to say that unless something is good, it's not beautiful, and a good person wouldn't desire it. And so this ladder of ascent that Socrates describes sort of presupposes that it is a sort of a good person desiring these things. So if we look at 210A through E, we get sort of the summary of Socrates' recounting of Diotima's speech. First, Diotima says there's the love for one body, right? You see someone, you're like, wow, that person's really hot, right? I have eros towards that particular body. But then she says, or Socrates says, quoting her, one should realize that the beauty of any one body is the brother to the beauty of any other, and that if he is to pursue beauty of form, he'd be foolish not to think that the beauty of all bodies is one and the same. So you look at someone and you're like, wow, that person is really hot. And then you look over there and you're like, wow, that person's really hot too, right? So now you have two really hot people. What you should realize, according to Diotima, is that they share the same quality of, being beautiful. And if you are a lover of beauty, you should not attach yourself to one person or the other, but to sort of the beauty that they share, right? You would have to admit that what you are interested in is sort of the beauty that this person has, the beauty that that person has, the beauty that the other person has. And so what you ultimately should be interested in is beauty, or the beautifulness of their body. And so Diotima says, when he grasps this, he must become a lover of all beautiful bodies. And he must think that this wild gaping after just one body is a small thing and despise it. So now it sounds like Diotima is saying that, you should become a swinger and just, have eros for, any person that crosses your path that has, qualities that you find beautiful, right? You shouldn't limit yourself to just one. You should just, have at it. But that's not what she is saying. Because the next step is to realize that the beauty of a soul is more valuable than the beauty of a body, right? So that what you should realize is once you begin to separate the idea of beauty from particular people, you've already sort of gone one step more abstract. And then you should realize that what's more important than a beautiful body is a beautiful soul, right? Because someone could be, very, very good looking, but a terrible person, and you really don't want to spend much time with them, right? Like, you get to a point where no matter how, attractive you might find a person, if they're a bad person, you just don't want to be around them. So ultimately you realize that what matters is the beauty of the soul, not the beauty of the body. So that's another level of abstraction. Now we're interested, now when we're talking about beautiful people, we're not talking about, celebrities on the cover of magazines at the checkout in the supermarket, but now we're talking about beautiful souls. We're talking about people that are beautiful, we might say, on the inside. Now, what makes them have beautiful souls? What conditions for the possibility of someone having a beautiful soul? Well, Diotima and Socrates think that this doesn't just happen. People aren't born that way, right? People have to be educated or raised in a certain way. And so what ends up happening is the next level is to, as she says, or Socrates says, quoting her, to gaze at the beauty of activities and laws and see all of this is akin to itself, with the result that he will think that the beauty of bodies is a thing of no importance, right? So now I've realized that what's really beautiful is firstly, people's souls, and then the laws and the education that forms the souls in that way, right? What's really beautiful is not individual people, but we might say the social structures and the laws and things that make individual people good. Now, if you read other texts by Plato, you'll see, like, if you read Plato's Republic, which you should, you'll see that Plato thinks that whether or not somebody is good in this sense that, Socrates and Diotima are using, is largely going to be an effect of their education, and education is prescribed by the laws. So the laws that have people educated in certain ways to produce beautiful souls in them, right? Ultimately, those are even more beautiful or more important than the beauty of an individual person's soul, right? So see what happened. Our concern with beauty went from an individual person that we think is hot to a general desire for beautiful people in general, to then realizing that souls are more important than bodies, so that a beautiful soul is more important than a beautiful body, and then realizing that we only get beautiful souls by having beautiful laws that prescribe sort of a beautiful education. So now our quest for beauty has taken us very, very far from the kinds of things that, Pausanias and those guys were talking about in earlier parts of the text. And then the question is, well, how do we get good laws? How do we get these laws that produce beautiful people? Well, the lawgiver or the lawmaker would have to have knowledge. And so we begin to see that knowledge is more beautiful than even the laws, because the knowledge makes the laws possible. So Diotima, again, Socrates quoting Diotima, says, "But the lovers turn to the great sea of beauty. In gazing upon this, he gives birth to many gloriously beautiful ideas and theories, an unstinting love of wisdom, until, having grown and been strengthened by them, he catches sight of such knowledge, and it is the knowledge of such beauty." So we get to this level of thinking about the lawgiver and the lawgiver's knowledge. We begin to realize that knowledge itself is more beautiful than any of the things that came before it, right? That what we are attracted towards, right? Because remember, beauty is something that we are attracted to. And so what we should be now attracted to is knowledge. And knowledge in Socrates and Plato has a very specific meaning, right? There's only certain things that one can have knowledge of. You can't have knowledge of anything. So, for example, in Plato's usage of the term, I can't know what color shirt I'm wearing. You might think that's a stupid thing for Plato to say. How could I not know what color shirt I'm wearing? It's right here. I can just look. Well, because for Plato, the paradigmatic sort of knowledge is math. And when you think about math, you realize that mathematical truths never change, that they're necessary and eternal, right? 2 + 2 = 4, it always equals 4. It'll never not equal 4, right? That is a necessary and eternal truth. That's the kind of thing you can have knowledge of. You can't have knowledge of the color of shirt that I have because this doesn't last forever. Essentially, for Plato, you can only have knowledge of things that last forever. I can't have knowledge of, again, the color shirt I'm wearing because this doesn't last forever, but I can have knowledge that in a right triangle, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, because that will be true forever. One of the effects of this is that you can't have knowledge of the physical world, because just like my shirt won't always exist, neither will a particular beautiful body or a particular beautiful person or anything like that. Ultimately, the only thing that we can have knowledge of are these eternal, universal truths. Now, you might say to yourself, well, what happens to beauty then? Because I don't think math is particularly beautiful. Well, you would be wrong. Socrates and Plato think that math is quite beautiful. But math is only the beginning of necessary and eternal truths. It's only like the easy example that we use to introduce the concept. Because Socrates does think that there is a form of beauty. There is sort of the beautiful itself. So the beautiful itself is what is the concept that they're going to introduce shortly, right? So they begin to talk about how it always is. It neither comes into being nor passes away. It neither waxes nor wanes. It's not beautiful this way or ugly that way, nor beautiful at one time and ugly at another, nor beautiful in relation to one thing or ugly in relation to one thing, nor is it beautiful here but ugly there, as it would be if it were beautiful for some people and ugly for others. It is beauty itself, by itself, with itself in one form, right? And this is the ultimate object of Eros for Socrates. The ultimate object of Eros is not a hot person. That's really just the baby stage of Eros. That's the beginning stage. The ultimate object of Eros for Socrates is eternal universal truths. And that what love is, on this way of thinking, is the desire to have knowledge of eternal and universal truths. It's the desire for something that transcends the physical world around us. And it's a desire for something that goes beyond what any individual person can give to you. So if you've ever heard the phrase, platonic love, it's partly a reference to this, that it's a form of love that has no sort of physical element attached to it, right? It's transcended that to become a love for something much more abstract, but Socrates, Plato would maintain much more real, right? Because it lasts forever. To summarize this, you can look at 211C through D. This is the mystery of love. One goes always upward for the sake of this beauty, starting out from the beautiful thing and using them like rising stairs, from one body to two, and from two to all beautiful bodies, and then from beautiful bodies to beautiful customs, and from customs to learning beautiful things, and from these lessons he arrives in the end at this lesson, which is learning of this very beauty, so that in the end he comes to know just what it is to be beautiful, right? He comes to have knowledge of beauty itself. All right, so the point of Socrates' speech is that the erotic desires that everybody experiences points beyond the physical world towards a higher and deeper desire for transcendent, eternal, and universal truths. So ultimately for Socrates, love is not about one's relationship with other people, right? That's really just a stepping stone. Love is about one's relationship with the eternal. There is built into us, so to speak, this desire, because eros is natural. It's natural for us to have erotic longings towards people. I mean, that's something that everyone's experienced. But if you limit it to just that, Socrates would say you fundamentally misunderstood it. That is a symptom or a manifestation of a much deeper desire, which is a longing for the eternal. If we were to ask Socrates, what is love? The answer is that love is a desire for the eternal, ultimately for knowledge of the forms of necessary and universal truths, and really a desire to transcend the physical world and come to knowledge of what we might call spiritual or intelligible realities.